What do you mean the pallets are stacked like that? Are you trying to kill somebody? Dorian Fisher watched from the far end of the loading dock, hidden beneath a shaggy brown wig, thick-rimmed glasses, and a borrowed name tag that read Keith New Hire. His voice was low, but his pulse had spiked. It was his first day undercover at one of his own warehouses, Warehouse 7, located just outside Columbus. He'd inherited the company from his father 6 years ago. Back then, there were only 3 warehouses. Now there were 9. He'd focused on expansion, more contracts, more square footage, more profit. But lately, complaints had started trickling in. Delayed shipments, high turnover. A small fire incident at Warehouse 4 raised alarms, but the manager called it minor. Dorian didn't like relying on filtered reports anymore. He needed to see the truth, so here he was. Warehouse 7 was one of the newer locations. He'd never visited, never met the staff. Most workers didn't know what he looked like. Corporate rarely showed up, and he had no online presence. His disguise was tight. The beard stubble helped. "Keith," barked a voice behind him. A tall man in his late 30s, shaved head, clipboard in hand. "You just gonna stand there or help unload?" "Sorry, second day ever in a warehouse," Dorian mumbled. "Yeah, no kidding, I'm Aaron, I run the floor, you don't slow us down, we'll get along fine." "That clear?" "Yeah, got it." Dorian fell in line with the others, helping unload a shipment of boxed electric heaters. It was heavy work, hot, loud, and chaotic. He watched how people moved, some worked with purpose. Others dragged. The woman next to him, about 5 feet tall and wiry, moved like she'd been doing this her whole life. She lifted boxes twice her size without flinching. "Hey," she said during a water break. "You're new, right? I'm Angela Zeller. Try to pace yourself. People burn out fast here." "Thanks, appreciate it. You been here long?" 3 years, too long," she gave a tired smile. "But I've got a kid, gotta keep the lights on." Dorian asked, "Is it always this disorganized?" Angela glanced around and leaned in. "Depends who's on shift." "Aaron's been here 6 months, tries to run it like the army but cuts corners, doesn't like when people ask questions." "Like what?" "Like why the fire alarm hasn't worked since February." Dorian blinked. "What?" Angela nodded. "We had a small electrical spark in the back corner 2 weeks ago. Nothing huge but smoke. No alarm. We told Aaron, he said he logged the request. But nothing's happened." Dorian's stomach dropped. "You told anyone else?" "District manager came by once. Aaron acted like everything was fine." "We've stopped bothering." Dorian stared at the ceiling. The fire alarm panel near the office door had a blinking red light. He hadn't noticed it before. "Isn't that a code violation?" he asked. Angela laughed without humor. "You'd think." "But no one cares unless someone gets hurt." The loudspeaker crackled. "Lunch break over in 5. Angela stood. "Better get moving before Aaron sees us chatting too long." Dorian's hand stayed on his water bottle, eyes following her as she walked away. Fire alarms not working. A manager ignoring safety. He shook his head. He wanted to give Aaron the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a maintenance backlog. Maybe he really did report it and someone else dropped the ball. But if this was true, it was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Worse, someone could die. He clenched his jaw and stood up. For now, he was still Keith, still the trainee. But he wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, Dorian arrived early. The warehouse was still dark, the sodium lights humming as they flickered on. He walked in through the side entrance with 2 other workers who wore the same dull gray uniforms and the same tired eyes. Nobody spoke much. The air was cold, and the concrete floor made their footsteps echo. He clocked in using the old wall-mounted system and noticed something odd. A clipboard next to the time clock listed maintenance tickets. The top sheet had 3 entries from the past week. None of them mentioned the fire alarm. He took a mental note. Angela wasn't on shift yet. Most of the people wandering in looked unfamiliar, likely from the second crew. That meant Aaron would be running things again. And from the sound of heavy boots stomping down the catwalk above the racks, he was already making his rounds. By the time the first shipment truck backed into the bay, Dorian had been assigned to Zone D, the farthest corner of the loading dock. It was humid there, due to a leaky compressor unit that hissed constantly by the sorting table. The guy working beside him introduced himself as Malik. He was in his mid-20s, wiry and fast with his hands. "Once you get a rhythm, it's not too bad," Malik said, lifting a pallet of dehumidifiers with a manual jack. "Just don't let Aaron catch you slowing. He doesn't care if you're new." "Has he always been like that?" Dorian asked, carefully slicing open a box with a dull blade. Malik paused, then lowered his voice. "Had a guy pass out last week from the heat. Compressor's been broken for months. Aaron told him to sit in the break room for 10, then get back to it. No paramedics, nothing." Dorian glanced at him. "That's not legal." Malik gave a small shrug. "Nothing here is, but people need the hours." A sharp whistle rang out across the warehouse. "Let's go." Aaron's voice cut through the buzz. "Zone D, pick it up." Malik rolled his eyes and pushed the pallet forward. Dorian followed, gritting his teeth. The compressor hissed again. The air was thick, pushing against his lungs. Sweat clung to his forehead. By midday, Dorian's shirt was soaked through. He hadn't seen a working fan, and the only water fountain in the area barely trickled. He decided to take a quick trip to the front office, pretending to look for the restroom. He passed by a small side hallway and slowed when he heard voices. "Told him again this morning. We don't have the budget for a full maintenance call," said Aaron. A woman replied, her tone low but firm. "Then we're going to get cited. The system's flagged." "The district inspection is next week," Aaron sighed. "I'll move the panel, they only check what we show them." Dorian didn't move. The woman spoke again. "And the overtime logs, you're splitting hours between IDs again, that's illegal." There was a long pause. "Then don't look at the logs," Aaron said, voice suddenly cold. Dorian stepped back quickly, then resumed walking down the hall as if he'd just come in. The woman exited the office a moment later. She was in her early 40s, wearing steel toe boots and a manager's badge that reads C. "Hightower?" She barely glanced at him. Dorian waited until she turned the corner, then walked past the office again. The door was left slightly ajar. Aaron sat at the desk, a spreadsheet open on the monitor, a calculator in his hand. He didn't knock, just kept walking. The rest of the day blurred into repetition: lifting, sorting, stacking, scanning. Angela arrived halfway through the shift, rubbing her wrist as she walked. She nodded to Dorian but didn't say much. 2 hours later, a loud crash echoed from the north end of the warehouse. Everyone turned. A rack of small appliances had tipped, sending boxes tumbling to the floor. A worker named Jorge had been pulling inventory from the second level with a portable ladder. He lay curled on the ground, clutching his leg. Dorian ran over, followed by Angela and Malik. Jorge's face was pale, his breathing shallow. "Don't move him," Angela said. "Someone call emergency." Aaron appeared a moment later, walking fast but not running. His face was flat. "What happened?" "He fell from the ladder," Malik said. "It slipped." "Might have broken something." Aaron knelt down, eyes scanning Jorge but not touching him. "Warehouse policy says we don't call emergency unless it's life-threatening," he said. "Someone help him up. We'll get him into the break room." "No," Dorian said, stepping between them. "He needs a paramedic." His legs twisted. Aaron's eyes narrowed. "You're a trainee, you don't give orders." Angela stepped in. "With respect, Aaron, he's right. This is serious. He'll be fine." Aaron turned to another worker. "Go get the dolly cart." "No," Dorian said again. "If you move him and make it worse, you're liable. You're not a medic." Aaron stood up slowly. "You volunteering to pay the bill out of pocket, Keith." Dorian's jaw tightened. "I'll make the call myself." He turned and walked toward the break room where the main phone line was. Aaron didn't stop him. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. Jorge was taken out on a stretcher. A few workers gathered near the bay door, talking in hushed voices. Aaron stayed in his office. Angela walked over, wiping her hands on her shirt. "You okay?" she asked. Dorian nodded. "Don't let him get to you. He bullies anyone who pushes back." "I'm not worried about that," Dorian said. "I'm worried someone's going to die in here." Angela looked around. "Yeah." They didn't speak again for the rest of the shift. At quitting time, Dorian took his vest off and walked toward the locker room. On the way, he passed the break room again and noticed something. The fire alarm panel was gone, not repaired, just gone, a clean patch of wall where it had been. He looked to his right. The security camera above the door was covered in masking tape. He took a slow breath, then walked out into the parking lot. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his assistant. District inspection confirmed for Friday. Dorian stared at the screen for a long moment, then texted back. Tell them to delay it. 1 day. I'll be making a surprise visit Thursday morning. He slid the phone back into his pocket. Tomorrow was his last day undercover, and he already knew exactly what he was going to do. Thursday morning, Dorian didn't bother with the disguise. He pulled into the cracked lot in a navy work jacket with the company logo stitched across the chest. No wig, no glasses. Just his real face, tired, focused, and done pretending. It was barely light out, but the warehouse was already humming. A few workers were on the dock, hauling crates under flickering overhead lights. Dorian walked straight through the main entrance. The door guard, a young man with earbuds in, barely looked up from his clipboard. Angela glanced up from the intake station when he passed. Her brow furrowed, then her eyes widened slightly. She didn't say anything. He found Aaron at the far end near the back office, clipboard in one hand, radio clipped to his belt. He was mid-conversation with 2 team leads about truck delays. Dorian stopped a few feet from him. Aaron turned, scanning his face with confusion that quickly twisted into recognition. Morning, Dorian said, voice calm but carrying. We need to talk, right now. Aaron's mouth opened slightly. You're Dorian Fisher. Yes, owner. Let's go. Aaron's cheeks flushed as he followed him into the office. The blinds were half drawn, chairs cluttered. Dorian gestured to the seat across from the desk but didn't sit himself. Where's the fire alarm panel? He asked. Aaron hesitated. It was malfunctioning. Had it removed for replacement. When? Tuesday afternoon. After I asked about it, Aaron's mouth pressed into a line. It was overdue. We've had a backlog of maintenance requests. I've flagged it several times to corporate. No, you didn't, Dorian said flatly. I checked the logs. Not a single entry for the panel, not once in the last 3 months. Aaron shifted in his seat. We've had a lot of pressure, high volume. We're doing our best with, I heard you tell someone you'd move the panel so it wouldn't be inspected. Aaron blinked. I also saw you split overtime hours between employees under different names. That's payroll fraud. Aaron stood. This is being taken out of context. I've been trying to keep this place afloat with limited. You refused to call an ambulance for a worker who fell from a ladder. He was conscious. He couldn't walk. Aaron's voice rose. You don't understand what it's like to run a floor with half the staff we need. We're expected to meet quotas that haven't changed since we doubled our output. If I call every time someone gets a scrape, we'll be shut down. Dorian took a step forward. It wasn't a scrape. You gambled with someone's health. Aaron didn't answer. His gaze dropped to the desk. You're relieved of your position, Dorian said. Effective immediately. Aaron looked up sharply. Security will escort you out within the hour. I've already notified HR. You'll be contacted for a formal review, but you won't be returning to this facility. Aaron's jaw clenched. He didn't speak again. Dorian opened the door and stepped out. Angela was standing nearby, watching. A few other workers had gathered, whispering quietly. He didn't address them yet. Not until Aaron had packed up and walked out of the building, eyes forward, saying nothing. Then Dorian turned to Angela. Can you join me in the break room? He asked. She nodded, wiping her hands on her cargo pants. Malik followed close behind her, uninvited but not unwelcome. Inside, the room was quiet except for the hum of the vending machine. Dorian leaned against the counter. I owe you both, he said. You told the truth. Nobody else did. Angela looked at him. We tried. People stopped listening. Not anymore. I'm bringing in a temporary operations lead from our main facility, someone who actually knows what safe looks like. You'll finally get a working fire system. That compressor unit's getting replaced today. I already made the call. Malik crossed his arms. That's good, but we're still short people, and the quotas are impossible. Dorian nodded. I know, I've seen it now. Angela hesitated. Most of us don't mind working hard. But it's like we're disposable. When Jorge fell, Aaron didn't even look scared, just annoyed. That's going to change, Dorian said. Starting now, he looked at Angela. You've been here 3 years. I saw how you work. You know the floor better than anyone. I'm offering you a promotion interim shift lead. Higher pay, full authority to pause any task you think is unsafe. You report directly to me. Angela blinked, stunned. Don't answer now, think about it, but I want someone in that role who people trust. Malik grinned. She already runs half the place anyway. Angela shook her head, but her eyes said something different. Gratitude, maybe, or something like hope. Dorian stepped back. I'm not here for a photo op, I'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll sit down with the full team and talk about what needs to change permanently. Until then, I'll be watching everything: schedules, incident reports, clock-ins. If something doesn't look right, I'll know. Angela looked at him. You should have come sooner. I should have, he said. He didn't have anything else to add. So he left the break room and walked the floor. The rest of the morning was a quiet storm of movement calls made, HR looped in. The interim ops lead from the main facility arrived by noon. Her name was Bridget, and she didn't waste time. Within an hour, she'd already shut down 2 overloaded racks and posted a revised safety protocol by the intake doors. Dorian stayed until the last shift change, watching, listening. Not interfering, just present. As he walked out, he passed by Jorge's locker. A crumpled name tag lay on top. He picked it up, smoothed it out, and slid it into his pocket. Outside, the sky had turned a dull gray. Rain hung heavy in the air. He stood there for a moment, letting it settle. Everything he'd seen, everything he'd missed. The cost of being too far removed. The system hadn't failed by accident. It had failed because people stopped looking. And now he was looking. By the following Monday, the warehouse had settled into a nervous stillness. Word had spread across shifts that the owner himself had been undercover and that Aaron was gone for good. No one knew exactly what would happen next, but people were quieter, more careful. Some eyes held hope. Others waited for the hammer to drop. Dorian returned that morning without ceremony, walking through the same entrance as before, this time with Bridget beside him. She'd spent the weekend reviewing floor plans, safety logs, and team rosters. Her no-nonsense style had already made an impression. She didn't yell. She didn't posture. She just asked clear questions and expected clear answers. They stepped into the central floor together. Angela was already coordinating intake, clipboard in hand. She wore a new shift lead tag, temporary but stamped with authority. When she looked up and saw them, she gave a single nod, no hesitation this time. Morning, Dorian said, walking with her toward the staging area. Angela tapped her pen against the side of the clipboard. Pallets came in early. We're short 2 hands on Zone B. Malik's covering one of the lines since Jorge is still out. Dorian looked around. Anyone we can shift from secondary sort? Angela didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I'd pull Darren, but he's been dragging all morning. Bridget turned. Dragging how? Angela looked across the floor. He's been on his phone, took 2 unscheduled breaks, ignored a call for help lifting the heavier units. Bridget didn't hesitate. She crossed the floor toward the sorting tables. Darren stood near the far end, leaning against a stack of boxed fans, scrolling. He was tall, mid-30s, wearing a hoodie under his uniform jacket. Bridget stopped a few feet from him. You're Darren. He didn't look up. Yeah, you're on shift. I'm on my break. You're not logged for one. He finally looked up. I needed air and the phone. Just checking something. Bridget nodded once. You've had 2 warnings in the last month. This is your 3rd. Darren pushed off the boxes. You serious? I've been here for over a year. And in that time, you've skipped safety checks, ignored scanner logs, and now you're refusing to assist when short-handed. Her voice didn't rise. We're done here. You can't fire me for being tired. You're being let go for failing to follow direct safety protocols and abandoning your station. That's a liability. Dorian stepped in. It's not up for debate. HR will send your packet. Leave your badge at the front. Darren swore under his breath and walked off, the weight of consequences finally catching up to his posture. Angela exhaled and turned back to the clipboard. That frees up a spot on sort. I'll rotate someone from intake. Dorian nodded. Make sure they're trained first, no rushing. They kept moving. The floor didn't slow down. At noon, Dorian met with a small group in the break room. Angela, Malik, Bridget, and two others, Lewis, a forklift operator, and Mariah from inventory. They sat around the table, not as a formality, but as a team that actually had something to say. Bridget opened a folder. We've updated the protocols. New signage is already going up. Fire suppression systems will be fully operational by Wednesday. We've also requested a noise assessment for the compressor zones. It's louder than regulation allows. Lewis leaned forward. What about the overnight shift? They're still skipping safety drills. Bridget looked at him. We're splitting the floor manager role in two, one for day, one for night. Angela's covering day. We're reviewing applicants for the night position now. Mariah tapped the table. We need someone who actually cares about the crew, not just quotas. Dorian nodded. Suggestions? Paul, Malik said immediately. He's been here longer than anyone except Angela. Knows the layout, runs drills with new hires even when he doesn't have to. Angela added, he's quiet but thorough, good judgment. Dorian looked at Bridget. She nodded. I'll pull his file. They moved on. Scheduling, Mariah said. We're still getting skipped lunches. Not just because of staff, some people don't report it because they're afraid it'll dock their pay. Dorian leaned forward. That ends today. No skipped breaks. No docked pay for full shifts. If you're working a full 8, you get 30 minutes off the clock, no questions. If that means we slow a line, we slow it. Malik raised a brow. That's gonna cost. It's already costing more to replace people every month, Dorian said. Turnover is bleeding us. Burnout is worse. Mariah looked at him carefully. You mean that? I do. They talked for another 20 minutes. Action items were assigned, deadlines set. Not vague goals, real deliverables with names and dates attached. After the meeting, Dorian stepped back onto the floor alone. He spotted Paul at the loading dock, guiding a forklift into a narrow turn. The man moved with quiet precision, flagging the driver with short, clear gestures. No wasted motion. When the machine parked, Dorian approached. Paul, the man turned. He was in his 40s, stocky, with a face that looked like it had seen 100 long shifts and didn't complain about any of them. I've heard a lot about you, Dorian said. We're reviewing candidates for the night floor lead. I want you to be one of them. Paul didn't smile, but he nodded slowly. You'll want to see the back freight door before you decide. I already have, Paul wiped his hands. Then you know it's always the night shift that gets ignored. Not anymore. They shook hands, no speech. Just acknowledgement. By the end of the week, things weren't perfect. They weren't supposed to be, but they were functional again. Real schedules, real protections. Every shift had a person accountable for safety, and every worker knew who they could talk to without getting shut down. Angela's first week as shift lead came with headaches, shortages, late trucks, and 2 new hires who barely lasted a day. But she handled each one without looking over her shoulder. On Friday, she passed by Dorian near the intake gate. You still watching us? She asked. Every day. She adjusted her gloves. You said you'd be back in 2 weeks. I will, but I'll come through the front door next time. She gave a single nod, then turned back to the floor. Dorian walked to the edge of the mezzanine and looked out over the warehouse. The same walls, the same concrete, the same forklifts and steel racks. But something felt different. It wasn't the paint. It wasn't the policies. It was that for the first time in a long while, people looked like they could trust the ground under their feet. He left quietly, no announcement, no meeting. Just one last stop at the front desk, where he handed over a folded note addressed to Jorge's home. Inside was a handwritten message acknowledging what happened and a promise to cover all medical expenses, along with a check to match his missed hours for the next 8 weeks. Respect didn't come from apologies. It came from action. And this time, he wasn't leaving anything to chance.